Take projection.
Welcome to Check Your Shelf, the official book podcast of the Alabama Take Network. I'm your host, Jamie, and I'm here with my co-host, Jennifer. And this episode, we're discussing several different things, including our top book picks of 2023. How does it feel to be back on the podcast after a nice long break,
it's
Jennifer?
so exciting. I mean, I missed it so much. We just had such a hard time. You were so busy and life was happening. And so Jamie and I have decided we're going to attempt these podcasts not face-to-face. So I'm at my house, she's at her house, and we're missing each other, but we're keeping on.
Yeah, because we have quite the commute to get to each other to podcast. So we think that this is going to save some time and simplify
and allow us to record.
But we'll be face to face every once in a while.
And this will allow us to have more episodes. So, which is what we wanted.
Yeah, which is what we want, and which I will never say again, because every time I predict, like when we're like, this is what we have coming up, like you can just go ahead and stick a pin in it because I've ruined it. I've jinxed it. It's not happening, or it's not happening when I think it's going to happen. So, but yeah, so I'm excited to try it in this format and see if we can maybe get some extra episodes.
I hope
so. I do too. Okay, so let's start with you had really good ideas for what to talk about this month. So where do you want to start?
So let's start with our book of the month. Like our box.
Okay, that's good.
So I actually skipped January. But that's okay because I had some real winners in December. And I have an add-on that I'm looking forward to putting in my box for February. I've already listened to the book, and I want it as my trophy because it might go into my top books of 2024. So I need a book trophy.
Okay. What is it?
I noticed on Goodreads that you have it marked as want to read, and it is Butcher and Blackbird.
And it is yes. I almost started it today.
Word. Okay. The audio is actually hilarious. Like, I don't know how it would read. I was trying to envision that because, you and I have discussed multiple times how sometimes a book actually reads sad, but then when you hear it as an audio, it's actually funny. And this one was actually very hilarious. And I don't know if it's because the audio, the narrators, I mean, there's a lot of inflection and I don't know. Oh my goodness. Oh, it was absolutely amazing. I love it.
And it's about two serial killers who fall in love, right?
They challenge each other to a killing competition. And I know this sounds so dark, but it's actually not. And it really, a friend of mine though, she said, to sum it up, it is two very broken people who find companionship in each other. And I thought that was a really great way of putting it. There are some really sad moments in it, but overall it's really funny, even though they're killing people.
When I saw it, I don't remember where I ran across it, but I read the synopsis and was like, this is the romance book I can chat about. This one was written for me. Serial killers falling in love. I'm good for February.
Yeah. God, it's so good. And it's an add-on. No, it's not. Is it an add-on or was it?
Yeah, it is.
It's an add-on.
No,
I already have it in my cart. I just can't get it yet because I need a initial book, a pick to. I don't know what you can do later on, but I'm still not a BFF, and so I can't just buy any old book.
We I have the Frozen River. I put it in my cart today, and it's just like awesome, but you got to wait for February's book of the month before you can actually order it.
I've actually heard multiple people who are very well read say that is probably one of their favorite books in quite a while. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and it's Butcher and Blackbird by Bren Weaver.
Butcher and Blackbird. And it is the first in the Ruinous Love trilogy.
Okay.
There will be 3 books. Audio is done in duet format, which I love duet. It's like I don't know, like I don't know how to word it. Like when it'll say when he's talking, he actually talks, and when she's talking, she actually talks, instead of like the person doing a guy voice. Even though, does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yes. Yeah. Yours truly was that way. There was like a male reader for the guy and a female reader for the girl. I like that. It's very good. Too.
And they're just really great narrators too. So it was great.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I can't ever skip a month. I did one time by accident, like at the very beginning, and I griped the entire month. I was so mad. I had no idea how I even did it. I had no idea where the credit went. Like and I will say, with Book of the Month, they have great customer service, but only after you become a BFF. After you become a BFF, they do everything short of just coming to your house and hand delivering a replacement book if you're not happy. But that first year, you're just kind of on your own. And that's when I accidentally skipped my month.
That's where I am right now. I have one box left to be a BFF, which you and I discussed this. So February puts me at BFF status. So I bet I will not receive the extra Book of the Year book this year. I bet I have to wait a year. You think?
Oh, I don't know. I would just assume as soon as that your switch clicks over to BFF,
maybe they'll throw it in there.
I don't know. That's a good question. You'll have to let me know, because I don't know. I mean, they only made us wait forever to get to the Book of the Year stuff.
I know, and we still don't know, do we?
Well, we know who the nominees are.
Yeah, we don't know the winner.
Or the finalists. Yeah, so I'm guessing they'll announce that with the February picks, maybe.
So we'll yeah.
See. So my Book of the Month pick, and I went with my gut, like total intuition. I got Mercury by Amy Jo Burns.
So I have heard that's fantastic.
And oh my God. It is one. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads. And the only reason I ever give anything 5 stars is if I know I will listen to it again or I will read it again. And I was like a third of the way through, and I was so in love with the book and the characters. I was like, this is going to go into the reread pile for me. It's set in the 90s, and there's a family. It's 3 brothers and their parents, and this girl named Marley moves into town when she's in high school, and just immediately kind of falls in with this family, and she becomes this really important part of their story, like to each of them. Like she marries one of them, and she's like a mother figure for another one, and she's like a sister to it, and it's just really beautiful. And the friendships in it are really good. Like her best friend, Jay, they meet in high school, and you follow them through the years, and it's lovely. And my favorite part of the book was the relationship she has with the youngest brother. I don't know. It was just like she was exactly who everybody needed. Everybody needs to read this book. It was so good. And I knew I had done the right thing. Laura Lott had posted on her Instagram about it. So I had to text her today, and I was like, I finished it. It was so good. I was like, I don't know if I need to call my therapist.
No, you already unpacked a lot yesterday. So I had to look just now. I'm now part of Libro, the audiobook company. I'm part of their influencer program where I get free audiobooks. And it was actually one I could have gotten last month for free. They put out new ones every month. So I didn't pick it. So now I'm going to have to find it because I want to listen to it now or read it or something.
Yeah. Yeah, the audiobook is excellent. I went back and forth with it, and it was really good. It's funny though that we're talking about that, because I kept thinking if they had had different
Oh, yeah.
narrators, like it would have been even better, because it's just a female reading the whole thing. And the book's not perfect. Like as I was reading it, I was like, ooh, she really needed to go into more depth to make this connection, and she really could have done a better job, fleshing this character out. But I mean, ultimately it was just a 5-star book. So I was very, very happy. And I also got the Fury.
Yes, I have seen that everywhere.
The Fury by Alex Michaelides, and I have not started it.
It's a thriller, right? But I've heard it's like really good.
I don't even know what it's about. I can't remember. I did start Northwoods. It was an add-on. I did not buy it, but I got it from the library, and because I haven't read anything with murder in it for a minute. So
well, there was one
I got that one too.
I think. Let me look. There was one I thought about getting, but then I swear I think I'm supposed to be getting a copy of it from Simon and Schuster, so I didn't. I think it's called The Bullet Swallower. Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that? Yeah, that was one of January's selections. Yeah. I was gonna make it mine, and then I was like, I think I'm supposed to already be getting this from somebody for free, so I didn't. But it has like magical realism in it, which is one of my favorite things. It says, "Hold on to your hat, cowboy. The bullets whiz freely and magic hides within everything in this epic family border saga." It sounds fun.
Yeah, it does. You'll have to let us know
if I ever get to it.
Okay. Well, and I guess we should say that one of the reasons we released so late this month is because I wanted to have a chance for us to get the book of the month and get it in, and hopefully get at least one of the ones we get read before we do the podcast, so we can kind of talk about it each month. Because I live in I'm constantly behind. Like I will read book of the month books all the time, but I'm reading the one I got like June of 2022 that I never picked up. So this way I kind of stay
I still have
current.
four that I haven't read and from this one year. So it'll be okay. That's right.
That's okay. You read a lot. Yeah, you read a tremendous amount of books. So I feel like you get a total pass.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that actually made me sit and kind of think. I was trying to decide if I wanted to renew my subscription because there were so many I didn't read, but the add-ons alone make it where I don't know. I don't want to end my subscription. I want to keep going. They have great add-ons.
Well, and I'm so picky about fiction. Like just having the opportunity to get something every month where there is a 95% chance I'm going to like it. That's a real big deal.
Yeah,
for me.
I haven't in this 1 year that I've been a member, I have not had a book that I didn't thoroughly enjoy. Might not have been 5 stars, but I liked it enough that I would recommend, the book to people each month.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, do you want to go into our 2023 favorites?
Yes. Okay. So, I will preface this by telling our audience that earlier today I sent Jamie a picture of my notes, and for this one book alone, I wrote an entire page of thoughts on it. So I'm going to try not to be long-winded. I read this 3 times this year because I loved it so much. I know.
Oh my God.
I know. The first time I'm going to tell you, the first time I read it, I didn't like it, but it also, I don't know how to, all I can say is like it got under my skin and I couldn't quit thinking about it. And so I wanted to read it again, knowing how it ended, because the whole time I was reading it, I thought it was going to end in like a tragedy. So I'll just explain. So it's Alone with You in the Ether by Olive E. Blake. And I think it's categorized as romantic academia. Both characters are like super duper smart, and they both have mental disorders. Like he's OCD, she's bipolar. She has a court-ordered psychiatrist because she was arrested for counterfeiting art. He like compulsively thinks about time travel, and his 3 things he compulsively thinks about are time travel, perfect circles in nature, and bees. So they're both like they're just very intellectual. And when they meet, it's like they finally have met this person that makes them feel seen, because no one like gets them, because they're both neurodivergent and all of that. Okay, so they agree to have 6 conversations. And she's like, 6 conversations is not going to make us know each other. But throughout these 6 conversations that they have, they become very close and they fall in love, because it is a romance. And but this whole time it felt like the trajectory was going towards like a negative ending, because they're both so messed up. Both of these characters are just messed up people. And I kept thinking, there's no way this is going to have a good ending. And that kind of like tainted my first read, because the whole time I had this feeling of like foreboding, like something's going to happen to one of these characters. This is not a happy ending book. So,
Right.
but one thing too, I did have to look down at my notes just now. So, one thing that I thought the author did brilliantly, and I think this is actually a turnoff for some people, she made the writing style reflect the mental disorders of the characters. Like it might jump from first person and then to third person. And the writing suddenly feels like, when you're reading it, you feel like it feels manic, like if someone was having a manic episode. And it reflects the personality of the person, the writing style she picks during that moment in the story. But it is a romance, and that is not going to appeal to everybody, but it is so beautiful. And I've never been one of those people that annotates. I didn't even really know what that was until this year, where you have all those little like sticker thingies that hang out of your book to show where you've underlined. And have you done that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're
Well,
talking
I had
about.
never been one of those that annotated. So my second go round on this book, I filled it up with little sticky tabs. Actually, I listened to it and read, like whenever I would hear it on the audiobook, I would run and get my book and like underline it and stick my sticky tab in there. But both characters, so the female character, she's kind of hard to like, but the male character, his name is Aldo, and he's just precious. And he's got this precious father relationship, like a relationship with his father. And I don't know, it was just a beautiful story of some messed up people. And I'm an author's note reader. Do you read author's notes? Okay,
Yeah,
so at the end, I read the author's note, and I think this book was a little bit autobiographical, because all the bipolar disorder and a lot of the same scenarios happen. Like the author has bipolar, she's not medicated for it. So I feel like she pulled from that tremendously in writing this character. So that maybe that made it feel very real as well. But I don't know. This is one of those books I've noticed from Goodreads that people either love it and it's like their ride or die book, or they hate it. There seems to be no in between. Olive E. Blake. So she's most well known from the Atlas 6 series. I think that's the name of it. I haven't read it. She kind of writes like academia. It's like fantasy academia, that series is. But But yeah. So that I love that book so much that I have 7 copies of it. Okay.
I mean, I'm sure every one of them is different and special.
So they are, yeah. So there's all these like companies that have, like little subscription boxes, and they'll make special editions of books that people love. So each one of them is different.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that I was so excited about, so she originally self-published this book. And then it got picked up by a traditional publisher. And her self-published version sells like on eBay and stuff for a couple of $100s. And so I found one that was not a couple of $100s, but it still wasn't cheap. And it was like my Mother's Day present this past Mother's Day. So,
awesome.
So I have quite a few. Yeah. So.
And that is Alone Again in the Ether.
Alone with
Blake.
You in the Ether.
Alone with You.
By Olivia Blake.
Okay.
And funny thing, so I have a tattoo of 2 bumblebees because it's like a thing with my 2 daughters. And one of my book friends who hears me talk about this book nonstop, she's like, just tell the truth, Jennifer. You got the bumblebee tattoos for the book because bumblebees are like a really big part of the story. She's like, just admit it. You got the bumblebees for the Ether book. I didn't. So I did not do that. So what is yours?
Well, I will have to add that one to my list. I'm trying to decide which of these I want to do first. I think I want to start with I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. I've already talked about it a lot on the podcast, so I'll keep it brief. But it is about a woman who has she has a really popular true crime podcast, and she's invited to go back to her private high school to teach basically like an interim class, like a very short run class on podcasting to this small group of high school students. And when she was at the school, when she was in high school, her roommate was murdered, and it was like a big mystery. And she's back and she's thinking about that again. And then a couple of her student podcasters are wanting to do a podcast about it. So it's like that whole mystery gets reopened, and it's so good. And it's told like, when like her story from the 90s is it's one timeline, and then the present day is another one where she's there as a teacher. And it's so well written, and it's a page turner. Like it's a really good thriller for people who don't like thrillers. Like this is one. Do you think
it falls more into mystery?
That I would,
or is it thriller? Because I don't know the difference.
Like I think it really toes the line, because there's some really like tense parts in it, but it's not. I guess it's more about the mystery than the murder. Like my mom had texted me a while back and asked about like good books for people who want to start reading thrillers, and this is one that I would definitely recommend. And it's a big old book too. Like you gotta you know how I feel about those.
I'm looking at the page numbers.
But yeah, it was worth the commitment.
I have actually had it on my TBR for so long. And then you keep talking about it, and I'm like, why have I not just jumped in and read this? Okay.
It's on the NPR Books We Love list for 2023.
I did
also
see that when you sent me that list the other day. 438 pages. So that's a midway chunky book. Yeah. It's a chunky book. Yeah.
Yeah. But I Have Some Questions for You by Rebecca Makkai. MAKKAI. Okay, what's your next
Okay.
one?
Okay, so I feel like sometimes I'm like a broken record because I mostly really do just read romance, but each one really is different, and I just love them so much. I'm just a romance girly. So, but this one, I will say, my romance books they're not just like all fluff. This one had some serious depth to it. The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. And I love time travel books or like slips of time or like Groundhog Day kind of things. I love that, all that kind of stuff in my books. So the quote, I had to look it up. It says, my aunt only had 2 rules in this apartment. 1, always take your shoes off by the door. And 2, never fall in love, because anyone you meet here, anyone the apartment lets you find, will never be able to stay. Okay, so this is a story about Clementine, and her very favorite person on this planet was her aunt. And every year her aunt would take her on like these exotic travels, and they were the very best of friends. So her aunt dies, and Clementine is like, when this story begins, she's on the other end of some very debilitating grief from the death of her aunt. And her aunt willed this apartment to her. And so she's moving into this apartment that has like it just feels like her aunt all through the apartment. But her aunt always told her, and she didn't ever believe it, that the apartment has a secret, and it can randomly take you 7 years in the past. So one night, Clementine comes home, and she opens the door, and everything looks different in her apartment. She realizes it's happened. And it has taken her 7 years into the past, which was also a time when her aunt was still alive, who has now passed away. So there's this, of course, this is romance. So there's a guy, and they develop a friendship because she's home like for a weekend. But when you leave the apartment, you may never get back to that 7-year time thing. That's why the aunt's rule was never fall in love with someone you meet in the apartment. So this takes us through the back and forth of the time travel and then present day. And I don't really want to spoil anything because there's a lot of little twists, but it's just how the relationship manages to work out with the time travel and all of that. But more importantly, and why it made it to my top list, was her depiction of grief and how you continue. It was very hopeful. It was like, how do you keep on with life when the most important person in your life is not here anymore? And it was like very emotional and raw. And again, in the author's note, I read it afterwards, and she had her first draft of this book, and then her grandfather passed away, who she was extremely close to. So she went and rewrote rewrote the book. And I feel like it shows, like, it just felt very real, and the grief part. And I cried a whole bunch with this book, but it was good.
That sounds so familiar. Was that a book of the month?
No,
pick?
but it's been on a bunch of lists this year. It came out during the summer, I think, and it has been on a bunch of lists. I think it was it was a Goodreads Choice Award. It wasn't a winner, but it was in the, in like the final round when we voted. And I'm trying to think. It may even be on this NPR list. I think it is, that you sent me. So you've probably heard of it. It's so good. So good.
And tell us the name and author of
The
that one more
7-Year
time.
Slip by Ashley Pauston. And her books,
Okay.
she has a new book coming out this summer, and all her books have a little bit of magical realism in it. That's kind of her thing. So it's just wonderful.
Okay.
And I have
Awesome.
2 copies of it. So they have different covers.
Well, I can't laugh at you because I do that with Stephen King books. Like I like to collect like different the different covers. And it'll be because like it'll be something like sentimental, like, oh, this was the copy I read from the Stephen King book club in 1993. I've got to get it. And then the next thing you know, you've got 5 copies of Carrie and they all have different covers. So I get it. I get it. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with us.
It's okay. It's hard not to. And then all these special edition companies put out. So you remember I sent you my other copy is actually the library binding. So libraries apparently get a different cover than the general public. And it was so beautiful.
Yes,
It was just so like the original cover captured one part of the story, I guess you could say, but then the library edition had a whole other part of the story on the cover. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's neat. Yeah.
Like there's
cool.
there's 2 pigeons that are a very important part of the story, and they're on the they're like they have a little section on the library edition. I don't know. So they're both just beautiful. And it's a beautiful book.
Awesome. I'll have to put that on my list. Okay, my next one, I have tried to work this into every podcast we did since last summer, and I didn't put it in. I didn't want this to be like a throwaway book, where it's just like, what are you reading? Like it's very good and important. So like I've saved it for this list. So it's one that I will not have probably even spoken about yet. But it's called "Did You Hear About Kitty Carr" by Crystal Smith.
You told me you got that in your book of the month box one month, didn't you?
I did, yes. And I got it because it was, I'll read anything set in Hollywood or the movie industry or Malibu or California, like anything. And this is like this was like a Hollywood situation. And I was just, there's so much going on in the book. I was like, I don't even know how to describe it, but Goodreads calls it a multi-generational saga that traverses the glamour of old Hollywood and the seductive draw of modern day showbiz. So Kitty Carr she's a white icon of the silver screen, and when she dies, she bequeaths her multi-million-dollar estate to the St. John sisters, 3 young wealthy Black women, and it prompts questions. So it's you read about, it's like reading a biography of Kitty Carr, like from the time she was a child up until she makes it big in Hollywood. And then the whole time you're like, what is her connection to these sisters? Because you're like, at the same time, you're reading about them in a different timeline. And it's just, and they feel very like, one of the sisters feels very obligated to Kitty and Kitty's estate and making sure that Kitty is remembered the way she wants to be remembered. And you're like, this is just her neighbor. Like what is going on? So it's really good. And it's really well written, and there's lots of Hollywood stuff. And just like because things were very, very, very different, like in old Hollywood, and how like the industry was run and who was taken seriously and things like that. And I don't know, it made me think more than any book I read last year. Like it really made me think about some things like regarding race, like a little deeper than I had before. And I think that's the sign of a really successful, important book, when you have, when you leave it and you're thinking about like these real world issues and this real social element to it that also is applicable to the real world and not just set in this fiction world that you finish. So I highly recommend it. And it again is called, I never remember the author. Let me look. It's called Did You Hear About Kitty Carr by Crystal Smith Paul.
Well, that is kind of one of the important things that books do, to put it, like if we hear about something in a history class, for instance, we are not going to relate or feel as strongly about it usually unless as we would reading it in a story, because something about that puts it like relatable.
Right. Yeah, it kind of humanizes it, but like the people behind the facts, it makes it a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your third?
All right, so of course it's romance, but these are all different. So it's called The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon, and it's cozy fantasy. Okay, so this is probably one of like the most original plots for fantasy I can remember reading. It takes place in a fantasy world called Tanria. So Hart is a marshal who protects the people from creatures called drudges, and the drudges are like zombies. Hart is also like he's an orphan. He's just very lonely. He's kind of a loner. He doesn't really want people in his life, or he thinks he doesn't. So Mercy is the daughter of an undertaker, and she has taken on the role of undertaking for her family's company, Birdsall and Sons. So she and Hart, they cannot stand each other. They're like oil and water. They like from the get-go, they just couldn't stand each other. Every time he brings one of the little drudge zombie bodies to her undertaking service, they fight. But one night, okay, so this is a You've Got Mail retelling. I'm just going to put that out there.
Oh, okay. That's fun.
So, but set in a fantasy world with zombies. So Hart, he was like kind of in his feelings, just super aware of how lonely and alone in the world he was. And he just wrote a letter, and he just addressed it to a friend. And it was basically just his thoughts, almost like a journal entry. But then he just, on a whim, put it in one of their mailboxes. And because this is a fantasy, anything, the rules are out the window. So,
right.
The letter arrives at Mercy, at her undertaking business, and she reads it. And so they begin a friendship of writing letters back and forth, kind of like the You've Got Mail with the emails, and they don't know who the other is. And so this is what I would call an enemies to friends to lovers cozy fantasy. It's the little village it's set in has a lot of real quirky, fun characters. I laughed a lot. It's pretty lighthearted, but it does touch on things such as loneliness. And I mean, she has an undertaking service, so it talks about dealing with death. Without giving anything away, I know it sounds like I always say I cry in books, but I actually don't cry very often in books. And the end of this book, like I cried, like really, really cried. And I have a friend who read it, and she never cries. Books never make her cry. And she sobbed when she read the end of this book. But it leaves you with a very hopeful feeling, and it's a lot of fun. And it's so unique and, I don't know, wacky. So, The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon.
Okay, I'm definitely adding that to my list, because that cozy fantasy's got me ever since that Legends and Lattes book absorbed everything in my brain for the
first time I read a cozy fantasy, I didn't like it because I thought I'm so used to reading very high stakes fantasy where it's like an end of the world situation, you know? So the first book I read, I was like, oh no, maybe I want higher stakes, but I just kept on. And this year I read a lot of cozy fantasy, and it probably became my favorite. I guess that would be called a subgenre, would you say, of fantasy? Maybe.
Yeah,
I read quite a bit of cozy
Yeah.
fantasy by the end of the year. And cozy fantasy means like, I mean, there is obviously a problem that has to be solved with any book. But the problem isn't going to cause destruction of the entire universe like an epic fantasy or a regular fantasy. This is a lot lower stakes. And they typically should leave you feeling, I don't know, like what the Legends and Lattes, everybody said, like a warm hug. They leave you feeling happy. So.
Yeah, yes. And also, like with Legends and Lattes, even though it was not high stakes, I was just as invested in the plot and the characters as if
because there was a
high stakes
there was
fantasy.
a problem to be figured out. I mean, you know, in it, Legends and Lattes is on my list, but I decided not to talk about it because I feel like it's everywhere, or maybe it's everywhere because I'm attuned to it. I don't know, because I liked it, but I kind of just wanted to bring out a book that maybe not everyone had heard of. So.
Yeah, no, I think you did. I think you did a good job because I really do want to read. I really do.
I say no, not a lot have heard of it, but it has like 30,000 reviews on Goodreads, so it might have been heard of by a few people. 30,000 people have reviewed it, so
30,000 people were down with it. Okay,
yeah,
cool. Well, my last one is The Last Word by Taylor Adams, and it is like the thrilleriest thriller that I read last year. It was absolutely terrifying. I went from reading it at night to reading it during the day to reading it during the day when Corey was home to reading it during the day when Corey was like next to me on the couch watching TV. Like it was so scary and so creepy. And it's about a God, and it's like it's just something. She gets into this mess doing something that everybody has probably thought about doing, but just used like the good judgment not to. She's house sitting in this isolated place. She's only got one neighbor within like sight difference and within sight distance, sorry. And she reads a book and it's total garbage and she trashes it in a review on Amazon. So the author reaches out to her and is like, hey, this is like my livelihood. I'm sorry you didn't like my book, but could you please take it down? And she just digs in and refuses to do it. And then all of a sudden, crazy, scary stuff starts happening at this house that she's house sitting, by herself in this isolated place. And you're like, is it the author? Like who could this be? Because, that's automatically where your brain goes. It's where her brain goes. It's just, oh my God, but it's so scary and so tense. And it's a lot of like this almost like Hitchcocky and like something's happening in the backyard and she's trying to like realize, like she's trying to see what's going on, but it's dark and it's raining, and then she remembers that the front door's not locked and she's got to run back through, and it was so tense. I was a wreck. I was an absolute mess reading this book, but it was so good. It was so good. The ending was good. Everything about it was great.
If this scared you, so, I would die. I would just die of fright.
You would, yes. This is not for you or my mom. But it's called The Last Word by Taylor Adams.
Word. We are such different readers. It cracks me up all the time. I want all the happy butterflies, and you want to be scared out of your wits.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
I just don't like to get bored. I think that's why I liked Mercury so much. Is like if I'm reading just like a regular fiction book or an historical fiction book, there's going to be somewhere where I'm just a little bit bored, and I wasn't bored
I
at all
bet.
through the book. So, okay, so that wraps up our picks for our best books of 2023. So another topic you suggested that I'm really intrigued by is changes how we're gonna like how we plan to change our reading habits in 2024.
Yes. Do you have some thoughts on that? I have a few thoughts.
Well, yeah, actually, and it was so funny because I'd been working on this when you texted me about that. So last year I wanted to read a book from all these different categories every month, and the list was so huge, like it was never going to happen. So of course I failed, like at the beginning of the year, and then it just snowballed into me not even finishing my Goodreads challenge and all this stuff. So this year I'm like, I'm going to be way more realistic. So every month I'm going to read my book of the month pick. I'm going current. It cannot
can't be last year.
Can't be one from 2 years ago. Right. I'm going to read a nonfiction book, a book of poetry, because there are so many. Yeah, there's a lot of really good contemporary poetry out there. Oh, and that's the only other thing I wanted to say about the NPR Books We Love list. If you want a really good cookbook, or you want to know what's happening in like the world of poetry, and you don't have time to sift through everything, their list is great for that. So that's probably where I'll pull most of the poetry books from. And then I'm going back through. I've assigned myself every month a book from when we did the podcast, our October, November podcast, where it's like our to be read list. And we did 12 each over those 2 episodes. So I've assigned, like, I have to read those. I can't just talk about it. I have to follow through. So I'm doing that.
I've thought about that too.
And then my last one, I think you're going to laugh so hard at this. So I was like an early adopter of Goodreads. I have been on there forever, and I'm pretty sure I'm on my second account. So even as far back as this one goes, I had another one that I think I've probably been on Goodreads since 2008. Wow. Yeah, so I have a very extensive to be read list. So every month I'm picking a number between like 1 and a trillion or whatever, and I'm swiping up on my phone on my to be read list in Goodreads that many times, and then I have to pick a book from wherever I land.
That is so fun. I want to do that.
Because I'm like, this is too many books. I can't just start at the top. I've got to do something crazy. And also, I throw something on that to be read list, and then I don't think about it again. So I was like, there was probably really good books in like 2012 that I added that I never went back and read.
I actually culled my
so that's what I'm doing.
My list recently, because back when I was doing a lot of business classes and stuff, I put a lot of business books on there, and I don't want to read not one of those books. So I recently went through my TBR, and I still have several hundred, about 600 books on it, but I took out about 100. So yeah,
wow.
But they were all business books.
Maybe I should do that.
Or a whole bunch of those books where they're all the same, like someone has struck really good in the business world, and then they write a how-to kind of,
Yeah. I kind of have the same issue in mind with philosophy books, because every time one of my philosophy professors would mention something, I'd throw it on there, and like going back through those, I'm just like, God, I needed to settle down. There's no way I'm reading all of these books, especially not now. Not with this and you're brain.
So busy. you would need time to like really sit down and think it over.
Yeah, I don't want to do that right now with my reading. So that's probably a really good idea. I should probably go through and pull it. So what are you thinking about doing?
So Bookstagram is dangerous in that you see every new book that's coming out. And so it's easy to want, I call it like, the next shiny thing. And there are a lot of backlists. I was thinking about this year. I sat down and I actually read 90 new to me authors I'd never heard of until this year. I know.
Wow.
I was kind of astounded. I want to go back and read their whatever, their backlist because if I loved the book, I want to read the rest of their books. I have a whole Rebecca Yarros that wrote Fourth Wing. Well, she's written a lot of stuff besides Fourth Wing, and I want to read her backlist. I loved Rebecca Ross's Divine Rivals duology, and I've heard that all her other books are equally good. So I just want to read a lot of backlists. I want to sit down and look at, the authors I love this year and then what else they've written. Because it's so easy to want to read the next shiny thing. And I think it's obviously it's helpful to an author if we read their brand new book. But I'm sure it's also helpful if we read their older stuff. So that is one of my goals. I have a whole list of backlists that I'd like to read.
I love that idea because also if you like one book by the author, like you at least know you like their style and the types of things they write about.
And of course,
so
there's there's going to be growth in their writing style. So the earlier ones probably won't be quite so polished or whatever. But if I liked one or two of their books, I'm betting I would like a lot of their other books. So that's a goal of mine is reading backlists, not chasing the new shiny books.
So did you have anything else you wanted to talk about, or have we got it all covered?
Do we want to talk about the NPR list?
Oh, yes. Okay, so every year NPR releases their Books We Love list. And as part of my job at the library, I order nonfiction books. So this usually December and January, as people like Barnes and Noble and Amazon, like people are releasing their best of lists, I go through and make sure whatever's on the list that's nonfiction is available in the collection, because as people see these lists, the circ for those books is going to go up. So you want to make sure you have them all. And the NPR Books We Love list is my favorite, and it's very long and very
It is
thorough.
long. I'm scrolling it right now. There's several I've read and several that are on my TBR, like The Golden Spoon. I've heard it's really great.
I've heard that one's good too.
Yeah, I've read quite a few on this list, but it's a great list. It covers every genre.
There's one on there I was really excited to see because I knew it was coming out and then I completely forgot about it. It's called Monsters of Fan's Dilemma, and it's by Claire Dederer, who wrote this. It's a pretty famous article she wrote in 2017 called What Do We Do with the Art of Monstrous Men? And it's, basically about if you have, I think it was written it was in 2017. So that was probably pre-Me Too, but we were already thinking like in terms of, oh, okay, well, this guy was a real terrible human, but he wrote this beautiful book, or he was a great movie director. Like what do we do? Like, how do we justify that? And then also, or I don't know if it was, I guess it probably was around that time, like everything was coming out, like J.K. Rowling couldn't keep her mouth shut on Twitter. So I was working with a lot of teenagers who were kind of, really torn between, this is my favorite book series, but this person, basically, I feel like she hates who I am fundamentally. So it's like, what do you do with that? And then how do you have that conversation? So, but yeah, that book was on the list. So I've got it ordered. Actually, I ordered it and I checked it out. I have it in my living room right now. And then one other one that I wanted to point out, one of the other nonfiction, is a book called Rough Sleepers by Tracy Kidder. And it is about a doctor in Boston who provides health care. And he creates this like healthcare network for homeless homeless people. And it was so good. And the doctor, I think his name is Jim O'Connell, like he just kind of fell into this job because of his empathy for other people. And it's just really, really wonderful because, like working in a public library, that's a population that we see on a regular basis. And you want to make sure like that they're treated just like everybody else because they deserve dignity like everybody else. And this doctor in this book is just, he is a beautiful human. Like the way he remembers everybody's name and he remembers their circumstances and he remembers like where they stay on the street. So like if they don't show up to get their monthly prescription refill at the clinic, he goes out to them. Like he has a specific vehicle that he loads up with supplies and he goes and finds them. And it's just like some of these people have nobody. And you've got this one doctor who has really poured himself into this, this large group of people in Boston.
Wow.
So, it's really, really good. So what were a couple on there that stood out to you?
Hold on, let me get back up here. Okay, so The Golden Spoon, because I realized this year that I do like, I like cozy, and The Golden Spoon falls under cozy mystery.
I didn't realize that.
A friend of mine described it as that.
Okay, cool.
And she reads a lot of thriller, and she felt like it was more of like the cozy vibe. Here's one that I keep hearing about. Richard Osman's The Last Devil to Die, a Thursday Murder Club mystery. I have heard that series is fantastic.
Yes. I've heard good things about it too. So you haven't read any of them?
Do you want me to talk about the ones I have read? There's quite a few I have read.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh. Hold up. I went away from it. I lost it. Okay. I loved, let me get to it. The True Love Experiment by Christina Lauren, but you have to read the first one first. It's like a duology, and it is The Soulmate Equation by Christina Lauren. And it's a romance, but so this guy has developed this almost like a DNA service, and like you can you can be matched with your soulmate based on like your DNA. And so they decide to put him in it and find his soulmate, and it's just like their story, and it's like whether or not they had free will or whether or not they were forced together based on the science. And it was really good. None of this is true. Okay, so I've kind of seen mixed reviews of None of This Is True, and I think this might be an audio versus eyeballs on the page situation, because the audio it's surrounded by a podcast, and like this podcaster gets this woman on her show, and you slowly realize like the woman nothing is what you think about the woman, and she's telling her story of her life, and it's like this messed up story with her children and her husband, but it's done like a podcast, like podcast interviews, and that made it so entertaining for me. I will say I did not find that it had any major twists. Nothing like shocked me, but I found it to be a satisfying story. And I recommend it on audio because it's people they are just outdoing themselves on audio lately.
They really are.
They're putting a lot into it. Okay, unpopular opinion. I'm going to do an unpopular opinion. Okay. Wayward won so many awards. Did you read Wayward?
No, I own it, but I have not read it.
I didn't like it. It made me, I didn't like it. It left me just feeling like ick. I don't know. it like follows these three women who are throughout history. You have three timelines, and they've all kind of been done wrong by the men in their lives, and it's their story. And I read one reviewer, and it made me laugh so hard because the review just said, "Okay, we get it. You hate men." And I think that was the feeling I was left with. Like, every man in the whole story was just a piece of crap, and I don't know. And I feel like I have some strong feminism in me, but this one, I don't know. It gave me the ick. So that's my unpopular opinion, but it won in 2 categories on Goodreads Choice Awards. So I'm for sure in the minority with it.
Well, that makes me feel better because that Riley Sager book I hated was one of the books we love for 2023. What was it called? One of us is what it was. I can see let me look it up real quick. One of us is left. Did I just make that completely up?
No, it has. That's. I don't know if that's it exactly, but you're close. Yeah.
The only one left. Yeah, the only one left. Yeah, I did not like that. And it's like every time I see it on a best of list, like I feel shame, but not enough shame to reread it because I hated it. So we're in this together. You hated Wayward. I hated that one. They can't all be cowboys.
Fourth Wing is on this list, and it's fantastic. I always recommend if you like fantasy, Fourth Wing is a very easy, approachable fantasy book. I have seen so many people say, I don't even like fantasy and I love Fourth Wing. I think it's easy to follow. It's not hard on your brain. Have you read it yet?
I'm trying so hard, Jennifer. That was one of the things I was gonna tell you about the other day when we were talking. I cannot get into it. And I'm trying really, really hard. But that main character is just, I just want her to calm down. And I don't know. I feel like I'm not to the point where I love it yet. And to be fair, I started Harry Potter 4 times. The Sorcerer's Stone, I started 4 times. And it was that 4th time where I kept reading past, Hagrid, getting him to Hogwarts, that I was like, okay, I love this. So I'm going to read it. I'm going to finish it because there's got to be, it's coming. I like everything like that other people like that much usually. So,
well, I didn't like the second book, so don't feel too sad if you don't end up loving it, because I felt like the second book was a big disappointment for me.
And there's how many of them? Didn't you say there's like an obscene number of books?
I feel like 5 is a lot for a fantasy series when they're really big books.
And we just got Iron Flame in November. So when does the third one come out? Do we have a date
She did
yet?
say she's going to take it slow because writing Iron Flame, writing them both so quickly was very hard on her mental health. So she's slowing down a little. I did see that interview.
Well, y'all better hope she's not going to.
I know.
George
That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, what if she has no story left in her? What if it's gone?
Well, it's being adapted, so they would just do what they did with Game of Thrones and just go ahead and throw that ending together for her, and that way you still got the show.
Yeah, and that's that one has mixed reviews too, right? That ending.
Yeah.
Okay, the last one that I'm seeing that I loved, my daughter and I actually both loved it. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. So
I think about Anna Faith every time I see that book.
She loved it
at the library.
And for Christmas, I got her the UK version because the UK books are so much prettier than American books. Oh, yes.
Really?
Have you never seen all the UK covers of books? I don't know why they get such pretty books.
No.
I don't know.
I'll have to look at some.
But it's about she studies like fairy lore and like fairy circles, fairy rings, all that stuff, like I guess like the Irish. And so she goes to this she moves to this little village where there's supposed lots of fairy activity, and she's studying it. But then, like, her arch nemesis, her rival at work, follows her there, and it's I guess a rivals to lovers cozy fantasy, and I don't really remember how it ended though, but I liked it. She kind of read almost a little. Well, I think I don't. I think the author wrote her as neurodivergent. She's just very. Think like Sheldon, Big Bang Theory. Like, doesn't get a lot of things, but she's researching like fairies. She's trying to find proof that fairies exist. So it was just so cute. But I don't know how it ended.
Yeah, I think that one's on my list. And is that a series too? That was what I was trying to remember.
I actually have the early copy. It comes out next month of the no, it comes out in 2 weeks. And I've heard it's really, really good too. Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Land, I think. But I don't know anything about it, and I got to read it in the next 2 weeks. So I'll let you know.
Okay. Well, okay. I think that is going to wrap us up for this episode. I always think we're going to come in right at an hour, and I mean well, but we just get to talking. So many books we've got to discuss.
We do. I will give our listeners a tip, because our episodes do run long, and in your podcast, in your controls of wherever you're listening, you can increase the speed. I always speed us up so that it's not quite as long. When I re-listen later, I speed us up to 1.5, so we sound slightly chipmunky, but I get to listen to us. So
also, in the show notes, I'm listing all of the books that we talk about.
Yes.
So, if there's ever one and then you're like, oh no, I don't remember what they said, and I'm sure as heck not listening to that whole thing again, it's in the show notes. And if we just mention it offhand or in relation to another book, I'm not listing it. But if it's we really kind of dig in and talk about it for a minute or so, I'm putting it in there.
All right.
Well, okay. Well, I guess then until next month, when who knows what we'll be talking about? Probably romance seems so cliche to talk about it in February. And I kept thinking last year, well, I'm going to throw this romance episode in in August or September, and it never happened. So guess what? We'll talk about it in February, because that episode will come out right around Valentine's.
I think that's perfect. Or we could throw it in October when everybody's doing witchy stuff. We could talk about romance. But no, I think it's perfect to do romance for February.
Well, until then, you want to let everybody know how they can reach us?
Okay. So I have taken
on our social media.
Not only have we had a little bit of a sabbatical from recording, but I also had a little sabbatical from posting in our Instagram. But you can reach us at is it Check Your Shelf Podcast? I'm drawing a blank. Hold up.
Yes.
I don't know where they can reach us, Jamie.
Well, and what's funny is I didn't know that we had taken a sabbatical from social media until Jennifer texted me to apologize that we were taking a sabbatical.
I just kept forgetting to post.
Get on it. Check Your Shelf Podcast.
And we're what we are. And what is our email address? If someone wanted to email it,
Check Your Shelf Podcast. Yeah, Check Your Shelf Podcast at gmail.com. And if there's any books that you want us to talk about, or you think it would be fun to assign us to read, we're open to whatever. So
yes,
send it
so
away.
Exciting. Okay.
Well, thank you for listening, everybody, and we will be back next month with a new episode.
Thank y'all.